Atlas, the sable-coated German shepherd, felt the thrum of Mars long before the red dust rumbled. The planet's heartbeat pulsed through his pores like a distant war drum announcing calamity. His squad, Kira the sharpshooter, Ramirez the exogeologist, Dr. Selene Kim, and Lieutenant Oshiro, fanned out behind him in pressurized graphite black armor, weapons glowing cobalt in the thin, bitter atmosphere. They had landed at dawn to secure the Morpheus Rift, an obsidian scar scientists once hailed as the cradle of microbial life, only to discover something far less delicate stirring below. Now, the mission was survival. The first worm split the crust with a wet crack, a sail-sized frill of mineralized flesh snapping open like a hellish banner. Oshiro's rail rifle barked, and molten shards burst from chitin, but the creature merely roared, a kraken shriek swallowed by the vacuum. Atlas lunged forward, helmet-mounted fangs gleaming where steel met tooth, his training letting him weave through jetting soil with ballerino grace. Behind him, Kira's plasma repeater hummed a staccato lullaby of destruction, arcing blue traces across the dawn-amber sky. The bolts carved glowing hieroglyphs into the worm's armored rings, each line a vow that humanity would not bow. Atlas's HUD visor scrolled tactical glyphs, heartbeats, oxygen metrics, ballistic trajectories, as if the dog were an oracle deciphering the planet's silent scripture. Selene cursed softly in Tagalog, jabbing an injector into Ramirez's neck because the geologist's soot seals were venting from a glancing acid splash. Yet even as blood threatened to boil in the low pressure, he raised his seismic hammer, detonating a sonic pulse that fractured the ground like stained glass. Chunks of ochre basalt levitated for a surreal heartbeat before gravity reclaimed them, raining shrapnel that pinged against armor. Atlas sprinted up a slanted slab mid-air, vaulted, and clamped onto the worm's sensory ridge, the crystalline taste of alien ichor exploding across his augmented palate. With a twist and a bark transmitted through optical fiber, he signaled Kira. She lobbed a thermite lance that stuck like a spear of sunlight, and the first Leviathan howled itself dead in a pillar of vapor. Dust settled. Nobody cheered. The tremors recommenced, multiple signatures, deeper, angrier. So Atlas steadied his breathing, ears rotating to the hidden cadence beneath the sand, the ancient roar of a planet unwilling to stay quiet, and somewhere inside his titanium-reinforced ribs, an echo answered, "Let it come." They fortified atop a half-collapsed survey dome, its curved panes spiderwebbed by prior quakes, and the vista below looked like an autopsy of the gods. Arteries of iron oxide canyon, ventricles of frozen CO2 veins. Selene patched Ramirez's suit with nanofoam that hardened into transparent porcelain. He replied with a shaky grin, then returned to mapping subterranean voids on his wrist tablet, every ping another breadcrumb in a labyrinth where titans nested. Oshiro set Atlas in a crouch beside a cluster of solar drones, stroking the dog's helm while murmuring old samurai proverbs about storms that shape the cedar. The calm lasted 40 heartbeats. Then the valley floor convulsed into a sea of razors, 30 worms erupting in staggered spirals like a macabre fountain. Atlas dashed first, muscle memory and data feeds merging into a single exultant flow state. He leapt across floating regolith, dropped a fragmentation collar into an open maw, and kicked away as lithium ice crystals geysered crimson. Kira deployed her monofilament kite, a bloom of filigreed wire that sliced through 5 creatures before retracting into a spooled halo on her back, blood freezing mid-air into rubies that glittered like confetti at a condemned carnival. Yet numbers pressed in. The squad shifted to concentric defense around the dog, their exosuits locking into joint-controlled phalanx formation. Atlas heard Selene's biometrics spiking. Fear, but her hands remained surgeon steady as she swiveled a laser scalpel to cauterize a spraying acid artery before it reached Oshiro's exposed hydraulics. Every sense blurred into raw instinct. Scentless air rich with ozone, the metallic whine of rail slugs, worm screeches modulating through subharmonics that made Atlas's chest vibrate as if a cathedral organ had taken root in his lungs. A colossal shadow eclipsed Phobos on the horizon. "Matriarch," Ramirez whispered, pointing at seismic graphs that climbed like the claws of a myth. Atlas barked once, command in its purest phoneme, and the squad obeyed. Retreat upslope to the basalt arch, lure the behemoth into the choke point, and pray the ridge would hold. Night on Mars is not dark, it is bruise-violet, streaked with auroras born of solar particles colliding with a magnetosphere long dead, yet still dreaming. Beneath that spectral canopy, Atlas led the charge up the arch, talons sparking on obsidian. The matriarch rose after them, a kilometer-long juggernaut whose segments glimmered like oil over water, each ring edged in quartz spines that sang against the thin wind. Kira flooded the canyon below with magnesium flares so bright even the stars seemed shy. Shadows danced over petroglyphs carved by ancient dust devils, momentarily revealing that Mars had always been writing horror stories in plain view. Oshiro synchronized the squad's exosuits into overdrive. Servo motors howled, and human silhouettes blurred into ghosts performing impossible parkour along the ridge. Ramirez planted resonant charges keyed to the archer's natural frequency, configuring stone into a weaponized tuning fork. Celine fed Atlas 2 ampoules of adrena oxygen, his carbon fiber lungs blossoming with superheated life. Then the matriarch struck. The impact cracked the world's crust anew, launched boulders the size of dropships skyward, and nearly flung Atlas into the void. But he gripped a jag of hematite, claws carving sparks, and surged back with the wrath of every mammal that had ever defended a pack. He sprinted the monster's spine, each leap a heartbeat, each heartbeat rewriting the concept of fear. At the crest, he jammed a beacon into segmented armor, Ramirez's improvised grav well emitter, before diving off the opposite side just as Kira detonated the ridge. Harmonics cascaded through basalt. The arch exploded into a storm of glassy shrapnel tuned to vibrate at the worm's internal resonance. The matriarch convulsed, body folding like burning film, gravity buckling inward as the beacon birthed a micro-singularity that drank light itself. A roar shredded the thin air, then silence heavier than any sound. Dust settled again, but this time eternity seemed to pause, uncertain whether to restart the clock. Atlas limped toward his squad through ember snow, their helmets tilted skyward, watching the singularity collapse into a pinprick that winked out with childlike finality. On the horizon, the dawn line crept forward, blue before red, painting their battered forms in first light sapphire. Celine knelt to remove Atlas's helmet, pressed her forehead to his, and promised the earth would know his name. Morning found them atop the scorched battleground, Martian frost crystallizing on molten rock, every breath a plume of diamond dust. Transmissions finally pierced the ionized haze. Orbital Command reporting incoming evac in 6 souls, tone wavering between disbelief and elation at the casualty report. 0 human, 0 canine. Yet the squad understood the war was not over. Seismic scans hinted at deeper warrens, sleepers beneath sleeper cells, an ecosystem of hunger coiled around the planet's core. While Kira calculated munitions deficits and Oshiro logged tactical after-action files, Atlas padded away to the rift's edge. He looked down into the abyss, where sunrise had not yet reached, and let a low growl rumble from his chest, a promise to any listening darkness. Selina followed, wrapping her gloved fingers around his collar etched with a cherry blossom sigil. "Guardians don't retire," she whispered, eyes reflecting two suns, Sol and the fiercer one, burning behind the dog's amber irises. Ramirez sketched new fortification schematics in the dust, with a fragment of wormfang, each line curved like a question mark aimed at destiny. Oshiro broadcast a rally call across all colonial frequencies, inviting volunteers to a citadel that did not yet exist, to a cause scarcely believed. Above them, Phobos sailed across the sky like a cracked shield begging to be reforged. Atlas barked once, the sound ricocheting off canyon walls, echoing through subterranean tunnels, carrying a seed of terror to anything still slithering below. He turned back toward his people, tail slicing the smoky air in a slow metronome of certainty. The squad formed up instinctively, an orbit around their canine son, and set off toward the skeleton of an abandoned terraforming rig that would become Fortress Dawn. They walked not as survivors, but as authors of the planet's next chapter, boots and paws scripting fresh legends into the regolith. Somewhere beyond the horizon, storms brewed and secrets waited, yet in that fragile slice of morning, Mars felt almost like home, raw, violent, magnificent, and the dog who guarded it marched on, every heartbeat another beat in the anthem of a world that refused to die,